Another McKinley will be a Tiger. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. An emergency bonus pod here after LSU on Friday did, in fact, as expected, land a commitment from Lafayette, Acadiana defensive lineman Darryus McKinley. Yes, he is the younger brother of LSU five-star defensive tackle Dominick McKinley. Let's start by giving you a little bit of the bio on Darryus, what it means for the class of 2026, and then the roster 2026 and beyond. So if you're not familiar, Darryus McKinley is a three-star. He's number 477 nationally in the composite, the now Rivals industry ranking, which is overtaken the On3 composite with Rivals and On3 merging. So we'll now refer to it as the Rivals industry ranking. He's the number 48 defensive lineman in the country. I tell you all the time, so this is not just because this is a three-star. I say it all the time. I am dramatically less concerned with what your star rating and your ranking is. I am more concerned with who offered you. Well, McKinley picked LSU over Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. Say that again. He picked LSU over Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. His other offers were Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Miami, Baylor, Syracuse, Louisville, Auburn, Missouri. You get the point? He had a ton of SEC and power offers, which says this is a guy that even if maybe the star ranking or the scouting services didn't think highly of him, that college coaches did. Blake Baker was his primary recruiter at LSU. Kevin Peoples was the secondary recruiter, which will be interesting because while Darryus McKinley is a defensive tackle, an interior defensive player, the fact that Kevin Peoples was in the mix there tells you maybe kind of like Lamar Brown might actually play on the outside in this defense as an edge. 6'3", 270 pounds. So still some room to gain a little bit of weight there. But remember, one of the things we've talked about a lot with Kyle Williams as opposed to Bo Davis is Kyle Williams wants smaller, faster, powerful interior rushers among his defensive tackles, where Bo Davis wanted these massive space-eating defensive tackles. It's not to say one's right or wrong, good or bad. It's just to say that the two defensive line coaches have a different approach for how they perceive the position and the talent at the position. You can look, for example, at what LSU has on the defensive line, and the two maybe best examples that I've been able to bring up are guys like the two transfers that LSU brought up. You look at Sadir Mitchell, who Bo Davis recruited to Texas, then recruited to LSU as a transfer. Sadir Mitchell, 6'6", 355. Okay, well, you look at Bernard Gooden, who came in the spring transfer portal after Kyle Williams was in place. Bernard Gooden, 6'1", 268. As a matter of fact, I had a national media member text me earlier this week and say, Bernard Gooden at 268 pounds, can he play defensive tackle in the SEC? I was like, first day of practice, he had 2 sacks from the interior. It just goes to show you a different style of what they want. So you look at Darryus McKinley at 270 pounds, and you go more of a Kyle Williams style defensive tackle, which certainly fits the bill, but does he maybe play on the edge in Kevin Peoples' defense? We'll see how that goes. Now, with the commitment of the addition of Darryus McKinley for LSU, that now puts the Tigers at 17 commitments for the class of 2026. So when you look at where LSU stands now, with the addition of Darryus McKinley, 17 commits, they're currently ranked 8th in the Rivals composite, the industry team rankings. But what's very relevant here, I want you to consider this. Southern Cal is first with 32 commitments. Georgia's next with 30. Then Notre Dame with 26. Texas with 21. Texas A&M with 27. Oregon with 16. Alabama 21. Then LSU 8th with 17 commits. If you look at the average rating, however, the average rating of the commitments. Oregon is number 1. LSU is number 2. So you're talking about quality over quantity at this point for LSU, but still could be some more to come. I also think it's interesting that specifically with this class, what they're doing on the defensive line relative to what they did a season ago. And I want to pick up there because if Darryus McKinley is in fact an interior defensive line player, he's just the second in this class with Richard Anderson. So what does that mean for numbers moving forward? I want to get to that. We'll do it as we continue here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. Whether and when you're on top of your hydration, you'll notice everything works better. Energy, mood, focus, even your skin. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I have been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor-developed, scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. So you maybe keep a few packets in your backpack or your work bag. Drip Drop will become your go-to, especially during long summer days when you know you're going to be sweating it out. And right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. So just head to dripdrop.com and use the promo code Locked On College. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On College for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. We've all been there. You log in early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. And you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal, Game Time's Zone Deals pick will pick the best seat for you in your section. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So as we look at the LSU class as it's structured and shaped right now, LSU has 17 commitments. Number 1 among them, of course, is Lamar Brown, the number 1 athlete in the country, but he projects as an edge at LSU. Tristan Keys, the number 1 wide receiver in the country, is next, followed by Trenton Henderson, an edge out of Pensacola, Florida. And then Richard Anderson, the number 2 defensive tackle in the country on the interior. Jabari Mack, Haven Finney, Bryson Martinez, Dylan Purter, who projects as a safety at LSU. Aiden Hall out of New Orleans, safety. Kenny Darby, the receiver out of Airline and Bossier. Emmanuel Tucker, big offensive lineman out of Mississippi. DeAnthony Lafayette out of Florida, the edge. You see, they got edge talent in this class. We'll get to that in a second. Des Ellis, Isaiah Washington, and then Bryson Cooley, Darryus McKinley, the interior defensive lineman, and Jalen Chapman, which tells you that only Richard Anderson and Darryus McKinley are the interior defensive linemen in this class. Now, when you look at the roster for 2026 and beyond, you're going to lose Bernard Gooden, who's a 5th-year senior, the transfer in from South Florida, and you're going to lose Jacobian Guillory, the 6-year player who's taken advantage of the COVID year, and then obviously his redshirt after being injured. So you're going to lose those 2 guys. But everybody else is back. Sadir Mitchell still has eligibility after transferring in from the University of Texas. He is a redshirt sophomore, so he is draft eligible, but he could be back for a 4th season in college next year. Sean Washington is a redshirt junior this year, so he could actually have a 5th season in 2026 if he wanted it as well. We'll see what happens with both of those guys. Of course, Ahmad Bro and Dominick McKinley will both be juniors in 2026. So that's 4 veterans right there. And then remember, you signed 4 defensive tackles in this most recent recruiting class. Buddy Mathis, Brandon Brown, Zion Williams, and Dylan Battle. Now, Dylan Battle transferred after spring when Bo Davis left for the New Orleans Saints. So you only have 3 remaining, but you have the 3 freshmen, you have the 2 incumbents with Dom McKinley and Ahmad Bro, and then you could still have Sadir Mitchell and Sean Washington back. That means you'd have 7 returning defensive tackles, and then the addition potentially here of Richard Anderson, which would make 8, and then now Darryus McKinley, which puts you at 9. It's also worth noting that as we record this on Friday, in one day, in 24 hours, Saturday, Deuce Geralds is set to announce his commitment. Deuce Geralds, if you're not familiar, is a top 100 overall prospect in America. He's out of Georgia, but his dad is from Scotlandville. If you're not familiar, that's just north of downtown Baton Rouge, and was recruited to Ole Miss by Ed Ogeron and Frank Wilson. Well, Frank Wilson is now recruiting Deuce Geralds to LSU. It feels like a 3-horse race right now with LSU, Ole Miss, and Oregon. Earlier this week, Shea Dixon from On 3 The Bengal Tiger said it kind of feels like it's a little bit of a lean for Deuce Geralds to Oregon, but I've had some people close to LSU tell me they feel really confident about it. I have no insight whatsoever. I have no personal insight to provide you. I have not spoken to Deuce Geralds, his father, or anybody close to him making this decision. So it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out. But that's one worth watching, because if they add Deuce Geralds, then that would be a 3rd interior defensive lineman, and another guy at 6'1", 270 pounds, who is a Kyle Williams prototype defensive lineman. So one worth watching, which would put your numbers in theory at 10 for next year at defensive tackle. You could always go into the transfer portal and add size or veteran depth or whatever you need if you felt like you need it. So that's one worth watching as well. But the one other point that's worth making as we look at how this LSU class is starting to come together is about how LSU is managing Louisiana. And this is a point that I don't think should be lost, because, when Brian Kelly arrived, and we've talked about this ad nauseum here, and if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say it, but when Brian Kelly arrived, I think he made one critical mistake. He built a staff that was half made up of people that knew him, his structure, all that sort of stuff, expectations, and half that knew Louisiana. And having someone like Brian Polian as your recruiting coordinator at a place like LSU was a massive miss. Now, to his credit, he quickly realized that mistake. He put Frank Wilson in that role. And now, over 3 years, the entire on-field staff all has connections to LSU. And then you look at the front office and how they've built that there, even the support staff, with the way that they've added guys all around the staff who are all from Louisiana, have ties to LSU. It's very clear that they're being very intentional about putting the fence around the state. And you look at this 2026 class, Lamar Brown, the number 1 player in the state, committed to LSU. Blaine Bradford, the number 2 player, is committed to Ohio State. But then the next 5 players, Richard Anderson, Jabari Mack, Bryson Martinez, Aiden Hall, Kenny Darby, all committed to LSU. So 5 of the top 6 are all committed to LSU. The ones that LSU wanted, they've gotten. Now, they had Ja'Kai Anderson committed. He flipped to SMU, but you sort of understand that because of the abundance of receiving talent that LSU has. But they got Des Ellis, who's the 12th ranked player in the state. They got Isaiah Washington, who's the 15th ranked player out of Haynesville. And now they got Darryus McKinley, the 16th ranked player in the state out of Acadiana. They got the top guys in the state, and then they've been able to sort of handpick and cherry pick the other guys they want that they covet at their positions of need. So LSU has done an awesome job recruiting the state of Louisiana. Remains to be seen if they could get back in the mix and try to flip Blaine Bradford. We'll see if it happens. That feels very much like a long shot, but it's one that they'll try to do. And then, of course, you're pushing that forward to 2027 as well with some of the top players in the state in 27, namely of which Elijah Haven, the number 1 quarterback in the country. So don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves talking about 2027. But as we talk about the defensive line and Darryus McKinley committing, kid from Louisiana, a legacy with his brother already on the team, fits the mold of what Kyle Williams wants, can also play on the edge if Kevin Peoples wants him there, if that's where he fits best in Blake Baker's defense. Blake Baker was the primary recruiter. You keep another top Louisiana prospect in state, and it helps fortify your numbers at that position for next year as LSU continues to build depth and talent on the interior of the defensive line. You can look at that defensive line and go, that's what it's supposed to look like. And you're going to lose a bunch of those edge players this year, right? You're all Jack Pyburn, Jamari Butler, Patrick Payton, they're all going to be gone. But after that, Gabe Relaford's back. You're going to add Lamar Brown at that edge spot next year. You look at what LSU has been able to do in this recruiting class. Trenton Henderson, 5-star edge who's coming along with Lamar Brown. That's just these guys that are coming in this class. DeAnthony Lafayette, not even considering what you signed in 2025 and the guys that you still have hanging around that are going to be able to grow and develop. Kalaj Cobbins is an athletic edge rusher. You brought in guys like I was going to say, forgive me, I was going to say Jaden Breaker, but Breaker's playing linebacker. I'm blanking as I'm trying to look at a blended list right now of transporter guys and recruits. But bottom line is, you're recruiting exceptionally well at the edge spot for this year. Of course, the number one player in the state for 2027, the defensive end out of Jesuit, who's now going to IMG in Florida, could very well be a part of your 2027 class as well. You're building up the defensive line back to what it looked like when LSU was a dominant defensive presence. The bottom line is the talent hasn't been there. Corey Raymond's getting it right in the secondary, and it's very clear Kyle Williams, Bo Davis before him, Kevin Peoples, Blake Baker are making sure that front seven follows suit. So Tigers land Darryus McKinley on Friday. See if they make it 2 for 2 with Deuce Geralds on Saturday. We'll be talking about it right here on Locked On LSU. Hey, thanks for making us your first listen. Please smash that like button if you would. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.